The following story has been brought to you by StoriesToInspire.org.
You know, some people talk about Emunah. Some people live Emunah. You know what it means to live Emunah? In Tafshin Ayin Gimel, 10 years ago, the Magid of Bnei Brak passed away. Reuven Karelnstein Zecher Tzadik Livrocha, there's many Sfarim from him, Yechi Reuven. I heard the following from his son, Rabbi Chizkiyahu Yosef Karelnstein Shlita. Moedik. Reuven Karelnstein lost kidney function 40 years before he died. That means he was 35 years old. A young avrich. 7 children in Bnei Brak, can't use his kidneys. He went to New York, hoping to get a kidney transplant. Didn't know a word of English. Sat here in New York for 2 years. A young avrich, no wife, 7 children, doesn't know a word of English, and nothing. One day after 2 years, his friend from Israel, Baruch Halberstam, who is the grandson of the Divrei Yatziv, calls him and he says, you know, Reuven, I heard that there's a hospital in San Fran, the West Coast, San Francisco, there's a hospital that specializes in that. I think you should go there. There's much more of a chance you're going to get a kidney over there. He says, you're kidding me. How am I going to go to San Francisco? You can barely get along here in New York. I don't know a word of English. I don't think I can do it. Rabbi says to him, don't worry. I'll come and I'll take you there. And that's what he did. He flew to New York and he boarded the plane. They get to San Francisco 3:30 a.m. They both call their wives to say, we made it, everything is okay. And then they go to a hotel. 7:30 a.m. 7:30 a.m. Who is knocking on a hotel room? They open the door. Police officer. Police officer! What do you want? Are you Halberstam? Are you Karelnstein? Says, yeah. Waiting for you downstairs. At the reception. Who's waiting for us? You have a phone call. Who knows that we're here? They go downstairs and they tell Halberstam he has a phone call from his wife. So Reuven looks at his friend while he's talking to his wife and he saw that the conversation was heated. It wasn't a very comfortable and nice conversation, but he was embarrassed to ask him, well, what's going on with your wife? They went to daven, they ate breakfast, and Reuven Karelnstein felt there was an opportune time. So he says to Rabbi, tell me, I noticed before when you spoke to your wife, is everything okay? Maybe there's something I can do. So Rabbi says, I wasn't planning to tell you, but if you already asked. Remember when we landed 3:30 a.m. and we called our wives? He says, sure. He says, my wife asked me, where are we going to stay? I said to her, I don't know yet. She says, I need a phone number. He says, what do you need a phone number, my dear wife? In a few hours, I'll get up in the morning and I'll call you and I'll give you the phone number where I'm staying. She says, no! What if they call your friend from New York and they say, we found him a kidney? What am I going to do then? The law back then was in New York that from the time they call, you have 3 hours to respond. If you don't, they go to the next one on the list. There's a big waiting list. And once you respond, you have 8 to 9 hours to come to the hospital because they can only keep it for that amount of time. So what if they call now from New York? He says to her, my dear wife, it's been 2 years that he's here in New York and nobody called. So now, in the next 4 hours, somebody's going to call. I don't know. I don't have the phone number. I can't give it to you. I'll give it to you in the morning. So Rabbi says to Reuven, you know what happened? 10 minutes after we spoke to our wives at 3:40 a.m., they called from New York. And they said, they have a kidney for you. So my wife started calling all the hotels in San Francisco looking for 2 Jewish people, Karelnstein and Halberstam. And she called, and she called, and she called, and she called. And at 6:40 a.m., exactly 3 hours after they made the call, they called her again to say, we're so sorry, but your friend never called. We have to give it to the next one on the list. So my wife kept on calling until she finally reached us, and that's why she was yelling at me at the phone conversation, and that's what happened. I'm so sorry. And he had no idea how Reuven is going to react. You imagine, after 2 years, waiting, and this was his chance. Reuven Karelnstein heard this. He got up, and he started dancing. And Rabbi, his friend, looks at him and says, oy vey, I guess he lost it. It's 2 years, he's by himself here, no wife, no 7 children, doesn't know a word of English. And now this, I guess this was the straw that broke the camel's back. He lost it. And Reuven is dancing and dancing. He says to him, what are you sitting? Come and join me. So, Mr. Meshuggah, what can he do? He stood up and he started dancing with him. He says, don't you understand? Don't you realize? He says, realize what? He says, the Kodesh Baruch Hu loves me so much. Hashem showed me how much He loved me. Obviously, these kidneys were contaminated. They would kill me. So Kodesh Baruch Hu sent me 6 hours to the West Coast to make sure that they don't implant these kidneys in me. Kodesh Baruch Hu loves me so much. Wait, I gotta call my wife. And he says, oh, he pays me. And now I'm in trouble. Reb Reuven runs down to the reception and he calls his wife. And he says, to Rebbetzin, we get a mazel tov. She says, really? What happened? He says, Baruch Hashem, they found a kidney for me in New York, but I'm in San Francisco. She says, oy vey. He says to her, no, it's great. We have to throw a kiddush in shul on Shabbos. She says to him, why? He says, because the Kodesh Baruch Hu showed me how much He loves me. Obviously, these kidneys were not for me. Kodesh Baruch Hu loves me so much. Promise me you'll throw a kiddush in shul. 3 days after this, the 2 goyim that got the 2 kidneys died. Reb Reuven was right. But at that time, Reb Reuven wasn't one of Gedolei Yisrael. He was a 35-year-old young avrech from Bnei Brak. And without hesitation, as soon as he heard the story from his friend, he stood up and started dancing. Reb Baruch Halberstam says, 40 years later, I still see in my eyes how he jumped and started dancing, because some people talk about Emunah and some people live Emunah. And when you have such deep Emunah, you see HaKadosh Baruch Hu in every junction. You see Him on every corner of the street. You live with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you are happy. 6.5 years ago, there was a mice in Petach Tikva. A father gets a call, I think it was a Thursday before Parshas Lech Lecha, and they tell him you should rush to the Beilinson Hospital in Petach Tikva. Your son was in a terrible car accident, as he's not in good shape. So the father goes there. And in fact, his son is really, really not doing good. And the doctors tell him, there's only one doctor in Eretz Yisrael that can operate on his head, but he doesn't work in our hospital. We try to get a hold of him, but we can't. Maybe you have connections. Make some calls. Try to get a hold of him. And this guy, in fact, has some connections, and he makes some calls, and he got the private cell phone of the doctor. And he calls him, and the doctor says, yeah. She says, listen, this is what happened to my son. The doctors are saying only you can perform this surgery, and they don't know how long he can make it. Can you please come to operate? And the doctor says, yes. As soon as I'm done what I'm doing, I'll be over there. Says, thank you so much, doctor. Thank you. Half an hour later, doctor is still not there. An hour later, doctor is not there. An hour and a half later, doctor is still not there. He picks up the phone again and he calls him. Doctor, can you make it? They don't know how much time he has. He's between life and death. The doctor says, yes, as soon as I'm done, I'll be over there. Thank you, doctor. Please, as fast as you can. 2 hours later, doctor is not there. 2.5 hours later, 3 hours later, 3.5 hours later, 4 hours later, and the doctor's still not there. He picks up the phone again. Doctor, can you make it, please? The doctors are saying it's mamish, it's imminent. Doctor says, yes, as soon as I'm done, I'm going to be there. Thank you, doctor, but please rush over. 4.5 hours. 5 hours. 5.5 hours. After 6 hours, finally, Baruch Hashem, the doctor drives to the entrance of the hospital. He parks his car. He walks right in. Doesn't say hello. Not to the nurses, not to the staff, not to the doctors. He walks right into the operating room, performs the surgery. And normally, when you finish the surgery, you go out as a doctor. You go to the family to tell them what happened. This doctor goes out, doesn't say goodbye. Not to the doctors, not to the staff, not to the nurses. Just walks out towards his car. And he passed by the father, and he doesn't stop by him. And the father at this point was fuming. So when he passed by him and he didn't stop, the father looks at him and he starts yelling. Doctor, if this was your son, you would also delay 6 hours? The doctor didn't even look back and continued walking out, went into his car and drove away. The father was so angry, but only for a few hours, because a few hours later he heard that this doctor's son was also in a car accident that morning somewhere else, and he didn't make it, he died. The first 2 calls he made to the doctor was when the doctor was preparing his son's levaya. The third call was during the levaya of his only son. And instead of going home to sit shiva for his only son, he came to perform a surgery on your own son. Now we understand why he didn't say hello to everyone, because he was an oven, he's a mourner, he can't say hello to people. This goes with what I said before. When you judge people, you tend to get angry. It's very hard to judge favorably, so it's better not to judge. Don't judge! Only if you are forced to. then judge favorably. You will live a very happy life. Years ago, one of Gedolei Yisrael was called, he had a nickname, the Sandlar, the shoemaker. Rabbi Yaakov Moshe Rubikov. He was probably the greatest Mekubar in his generation. This is the time of the Chazon Ish, and the Chazon Ish used to travel to Yafo to see him. You understand, when the Chazon Ish goes to visit someone, that person is great. He was a giant in Nigle, in the revealed part of Torah, and he was a giant in the concealed part of Torah. He wrote Sfarim. They called him the Sandlar, the shoemaker. So one day, Shimon was marrying off his son. Reuven, his best friend, comes to the wedding. And Reuven sits at his table, and suddenly he sees the Sandlar, he sees Yaakov Moshe Rubikov walking in. It's like, wow. Imagine you're sitting at your friend's wedding, and Reb Chaim Kanievsky walks in. He says, wow, it's unbelievable. Maybe I can get a bracha from him. And while he's thinking that, suddenly, this giant of giants comes and sits right next to him. Bingo! Won the lottery. So he looks at him and he says, Rebbe, maybe you can give a word of chizuk. You know, sometimes we go through different challenges in life, difficulties. Give me something that I'll be able to carry with me for the rest of my life. Rabbi Yaakov Moshe Rubikov, who was known to be such a humble person, looks at him and he says to him, you want a chizuk from me? You want a chizuk from me, eh? You know, back where I come from, in the village in Russia, there was a guy who would pay 10,000 rubles just to see me. And you want a chizuk from me? I can't believe it. This is the person they say is so humble. I can't believe it. I can't believe how he speaks. Who would do this? And while he's thinking that, he repeats himself and he says, so you want chizuk from me, huh? I'm telling you, where I come from, there was a guy who would pay 10,000 rubles just to see me. And you want chizuk from me. He says, wow, wait till I tell all my friends. I just can't believe this. And while he's saying this, he repeats himself and he says, I'm telling you, where I come from, back in Russia, there was a guy who was blind. He would be willing to give even 10,000 rubles just to see even a person like me. So you want chizuk from me? What do you need chizuk from me? You are a walking chizuk machine. You got up this morning, your eyes were okay? Digestive system was functioning? Your shoulders, your knee were bending? You're a walking chizuk machine. What do you need chizuk from me? Who am I to give chizuk? It's a pasuk in Iyov. From my own flesh. Look at your body and you can see HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So why do you need chizuk from me? And when you constantly count your blessings and look at all the positive that HaKadosh Baruch Hu showers us with, you're going to be very happy. It's an ongoing chizuk machine that we have. It's called the human body. It's called a connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Since it's summertime, I think it's a mitzvah to tell this maaseh. I heard it in the winter. I think it's a summer maaseh. Rabbi Lapian was standing at a bus stop with his talmid waiting for a bus. A bunch of people there. A lady comes over and she says to Slicha, ma'asha. Excuse me, what time is it? Rabbi looks at his watch. It's 2:15. Well, thank you very much. And she steps away. Exactly 2 minutes later, she comes back. Slicha, ma'asha. Excuse me, what time is it? 2:17. Thank you very much. She steps away. 2 minutes later, she comes back. Slicha, ma'asha. Excuse me, what time is it? Rabbi looks at his watch. It's 2:19. Oh, thank you very much. He steps away. The talmid is getting upset. Rebbe, every time she comes back, you're going to have to answer her? There's no shear to this. There's no end. Every single time, every 2 minutes? Rebbe Lapian looked at his talmid and he told him, and who told you it's the same woman? Who told you it's the same woman? I think it was Kedai. If I only came to America just tell this message, it's already Kedai. Who told you it's the same woman? His grandson, Reb Gershon Lapian, is a big poisek in London. He recently passed away. He was once walking with his wife in the streets of London, and suddenly he crossed the street. He went over to a married lady, and he says to her, wow, your shaitel looks gorgeous. It looked like $1 million with that. So amazing shaitel. Beautiful. Mamish beautiful. And everybody who heard it, and people who heard it, were in shock. What a breach of tznius. There was a chashuv harav there, and he took Reb Gershon to the side and says, what are you doing? What an embarrassment. How do you approach a married lady in the middle of the street and compliment her on a shaitel? What are you doing? What happened to you? By the way, your wife is here. Reb Gershon says to him, do you know, it's been 20 years that I've been working on this lady to start covering her hair. And last week she finally did. This is the first time I'm seeing her since. I had to go over and to compliment her on her shaitel. Who asked you to judge? You're already judging. Judge favorably. But don't judge. When you judge people, you're going to get upset. You're going to have enemies. You're going to be bitter. Why do you need it? You know the Shabak, the Israeli Secret Service, comparable here to the CIA. There was a guy, we're going to call him Reuven, who was hired by the Shabak. He started working, and he moved up the ranks. And the major focus of the training was that if you fall into enemy hands, no matter what, you don't give over any secrets. Obviously, job number one. And one day, Es asher yagorti Bali, exactly what he feared came. 3 Arabs captured him. They knew exactly his position. They put him in a dungeon, and they tortured him for 3 days and 3 nights. Give over the information that you have. And Reuven refused. He was trained to refuse. And they told him, look, we know you're married. We know you have 4 young children at home. If you talk, you walk. Reuven didn't open his mouth. 3 terrible days. After 3 days, they come to him and they say, listen, tomorrow 12 noon is the deadline. If you speak, you walk. You go home. If you don't, 1 bullet right here, and your wife and children will never see you. They left him. And Reuven tries to go to sleep and he can't. And he says to himself, why do I need this? Why do I need this? Do I really want my wife to be a young widow? My 4 children to be young orphans? I gave enough. I suffered enough already. And he decided that tomorrow morning he will reveal the secrets. Not all of them, just enough to be able to be yotzeh. And then hopefully in fact, they will release him. Following day, 11 o'clock, they come. No, Reuven, what did you decide? You have 1 hour. And he says, I still think about it. Reuven, you have 1 hour. And they left. And he says, you know, the Gemara says, Gzeira avida de batla. Sometimes decrees are canceled. I'll wait till the last second. And then he sits in his cell. And he suddenly hears some voices. He puts his ear to the wall. And he hears his captors. And they're speaking in Hebrew. That doesn't make any sense. Wait a second! That means they also work for the same service that I do. It's just a test. They want to see how loyal, dedicated, and committed I am to the service. You know what? So I'm not going to open my mouth. I'm not going to say anything. And he decided no matter what, he doesn't open his mouth. 11:59, they come into the room. The Arab puts a gun to his head and he starts counting the seconds. Reuven, you have 1 minute to go. Maybe the last minute of your life. 11:45, 11:59, 45 seconds, 46 seconds, 47 seconds, and 10-second countdown. 51, 52. He says to him, 7, 6, 5, 4. And Reuven is shaking, but he decided he's not going to open his mouth. 3, 2, 1. And exactly 12 o'clock, he puts down his gun. He extends his arm. He shakes his hand. He says, Mazel Tov, you just moved up a rank. And Reuven says, the only reason I was able to withstand the test is because I realized it was a test. Rabbi say, that's our life. All the challenges, all the difficulties that you have, they're testing us to see how loyal, how dedicated, how committed we are to the service. If an obstacle is like a hump on the road, so once you pass it, you actually find yourself a little closer to the Rebbeinu Shalom. It's all a test. Coming from a compassionate, loving father. So if he is the ultimate trainer who wants to make you an improved person, are you not going to be happy? You're in the best of hands.
Enjoyed this story? Come again. Bring a friend. StoriesToInspire.org